Today we go over Disney Star Wars and what Mark Hamill had to say about how the sequel trilogy is currently being treated in comparison to the original trilogy by George Lucas. This is Mike Zero here. If you guys are new to the channel, do make sure to subscribe to see future Star Wars content. Now, as you all know, these past couple of days, we've been hearing a lot of what's going on behind the scenes over at Disney and Lucasfilm, especially that has all to do between Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy, etc. However, I wanted to go over a recent interview in which Mark Hamill got involved with, and he briefly talked about how he sees how the sequel trilogy is being treated in comparison to the original trilogy. Now, I've mentioned this many times before that I do see a lot of inconsistencies within the sequel trilogy. You have like this whole entire concept by Disney and Lucasfilm in which each movie says here, this is what you can do with this movie, and they just hand it off to this writer and to that director, and they do whatever they want without even necessarily thinking about connecting it fully to the past film. Now, this is something that a lot of people have been talking about, and this is what Mark Hamill had to recently say. So he states, remember George had an overall arc in the original trilogy. If he didn't have all the details, he had sort of an overall feel for where the three were going. Now let me stop right there for a second. This is something that Disney and Lucasfilm didn't do with the sequel trilogy. They didn't really have a whole feel or a general idea of where all three movies were going. This is why we saw all the different rewrites and these, movies such as Star Wars Episode 9, and even with The Force Awakens. Moving on. So, he goes on to say this, but this one's more like a relay race. He's obviously referring to the sequel trilogy. You run and hand the torch off to the next guy. He picks it up and goes, Rian didn't write what happens in 9. He was going to hand it off too. Originally Colin Trevorrow and now JJ. And it's a very interesting word that, Mark Hamill decided to use. A relay, right? A relay race in which the sequel trilogy seems like, it's being described as here. And I do agree, it is like a relay race, because if you look at what's happening here at Disney and Lucasfilm with The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and Episode 9, originally they gave each of these movies to different writers and directors, and they allowed them to do whatever they want without really trying their very hardest to connect each movie together. And I think that's why a lot of people have noticed these inconsistencies between both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Now, I do in fact want to go over a couple of points here, is that, well, the relay technique to me, the relay race technique as Mark Hamill describes, to me it's just not working, and this is a big problem with the sequel trilogy in my eyes, in my point of view. Now, mind you, I did enjoy The Force Awakens. I really did enjoy it, and I'm going to go over how I feel about the ending and how it connects to The Last Jedi in a little while. But looking at everything here, I really do find that, well, so far each writer and director should find ways to work with the other writer and directors to make it flow better. And I've mentioned this before in the past as well. When you look at The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, I feel like there's some missing links here and there where it just doesn't flow correctly. And this is just my opinion. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree. I would love to hear your comments below in the comments section. But I think that JJ set up many things that were indeed disregarded by Rian Johnson in The Last Jedi. I've gone over this several times, one of which all has to do with Maz Kanata, explaining how she found the Skywalker lightsaber. And I'm really having my doubts that we'll be able to get that answer in Star Wars Episode 9. Because with Episode 9 being the final film, there's really only so much you can tell in a single movie, which is most likely going to be 2 hours and some minutes. So, looking past all of this, Episode 9, I really do feel that, with Episode 9, I feel like, it would match or fit more like a puzzle with The Force Awakens, since JJ wrote and directed, The Force Awakens, and now he's back for Episode 9. So many of the things in The Force Awakens, if they don't get answered in Episode 9, I feel like there's going to be a handful of fans that are going to be really left, unhappy with Star Wars Episode 9. Now, I also feel that there are indeed inconsistencies in the new trilogy. To me, the end of The Last Jedi almost felt like the end of the entire trilogy, when Luke Skywalker vanishes into the sunset and becomes one with the Force. Now, George Lucas's original treatment for Star Wars Episode 9, at the very end of the film, Luke Skywalker would die. He saved Luke's death to the very end of Episode 9. These are older treatments of the sequel trilogy, mind you. Now, to me, the tone of the ending of The Force Awakens, it was so magical. I felt mystified, to tell you the truth, guys. The cinematography, beautiful. We see old Luke, no lines, and then in The Last Jedi, he throws away the lightsaber. Now, to me, it felt out of place for me, and it almost seemed as if that moment was used for shock value. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with me on that, but I feel like they really could have taken a moment while writing the script, Rian Johnson, of course. I feel like he could have taken a moment and said, all right, what kind of line of dialogue could Luke Skywalker tell to Rey when he's holding this lightsaber? I would have done something around the lines of him quite possibly even just silently handing it back to Rey and then walking away. I think that would have been more respectful to such an object that belonged to his father, Anakin Skywalker. I mean, this is the object that Obi-Wan Kenobi handed down to him in A New Hope. There's a lot of, legacy there. And I feel like that's why Rian had Luke use the Skywalker lightsaber in his Force projection at the very end of the movie, is because that was essentially his way of making up, for what Luke Skywalker did by chucking it over the cliff in the very beginning. But that's just my take, guys. I don't know if you guys enjoyed that scene or not, but to me that didn't sit too well with Luke just chucking it over the cliff. I remember when I saw it in theaters, a lot of people were just like, what the heck? But looking at all of this, guys, I really do believe that Disney realizes now that it's best to have one or two writers/directors do all three movies and have a general idea of where the entire trilogy is going, and that's why they got JJ back instead of, keeping Chris Terrio on board, or should I say Colin Trevorrow, my bad. But anyways, guys, and as Mark said, with George, he didn't write or direct, all of the original trilogy movies, but he had an idea, a general idea of where all three were going, not only in tone, but the overall feel of it all. And that's why it flows so well. That's why it feels all interconnected, and it has a great narrative. So, looking at Episode 9, I really do feel that that movie is really going to tie in with The Force Awakens all the more so than how The Last Jedi tied in with The Force Awakens, if you know what I mean. Anyways, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.